know there is no bigger Dune fan in the world. You love Dune. You celebrate. Celebrate everything about Dune. You love the sand. You love the worms. You love the sandworms.
Oh, I love how it's always hot. I love how like every chapter starts with the new weather forecast, and it's just a guy coming on and saying, "By the way, it's really, really hot out."
Here, gang, here's a sneak peek of Brad on Arrakis. Well, it's a dry heat.
But at least you got sandworms. No, I really got like overwhelmed at some point. I'm just like, oh my God, I get it. It's hot. And I closed the book and walked away.
To me, it's such a shame that you don't like Dune because I think that book is just marvelous. But anyway, I'm a sucker for sci-fi. Yeah. So I love, my friend Fred Schroeder always says that I celebrate even bad sci-fi. I will rewatch Starship Troopers again and again and again, even though it's arguably a terrible film.
Now, let me just pin you on this for a second.
Okay.
Because I've been wanting to ask. Did you ever finish that one book I sent you?
The Scalzi book?
Yeah.
No, I have not yet finished it. I'm so sorry. Why are you pitting me on this?
It's a great sci-fi book, and you just got done saying you celebrate even bad sci-fi, and I've always wanted to know whether you read that book.
Here's the thing. Summer got away from me in terms of like, you remember my summer. It was Comic-Con.
Yes.
It was my Midwest trip. It was, I drove up to Carmel. Like every time I would go to sit down and read, it was like, I'm back on the road again. And then, you know this, once you get behind on deadlines, you're screwed. And there's nothing to be done. You're just like, I got to get back on track. Anyway, long story short, what I wanted to tell you, though, is that I know Timothée Chalamet is one of your cherished favorite actors on Dune. You love everything about Dune.
Love him.
But Timothée Chalamet is... So I just heard this thing about Timothée Chalamet, and it cracked me up. I wanted to share it with you. Apparently, people refer to him and to like Robert Pattinson, who's the sparkly Dracula. What's his,
from Twilight.
Twilight, yes, yeah. They refer to those actors as sickly Victorian children. Have you heard this?
No.
That they look like a sickly Victorian child because they're like thin and pale, and the eyes are a little set in. It's
my God.
Oh mother, I'm having trouble with my soup today.
If we wouldn't mind, I need a little push on this swing to get some momentum going.
My legs don't have enough swing power, and something about that just resonated with me, that like the power of the description of describing someone that is a sickly Victorian child just got me.
The only person I know who went to high school and majored in rickets.
So on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about sickly Victorian children and making comics.
And making a living from rickets. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
A show about making a profit from rickets. Is that like the idea that the only people that make money in a gold rush are the people selling shovels? The only people in comics are making money from rickets.
From rickets, yeah. I think it's a great word. Rickets just immediately conjures up such great images.
Rickets is a great, as far as a comedy word too, for an old-timey disease. Yeah. Anyway, I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And let's just do a quick social media update. I just want to go tell everybody we're on week 2 of the Comic Lab social media challenge.
Yes.
Things are still going great, Brad.
Yes.
I just want to tell everybody things still going great. My productivity is up. I am catching up on these deadlines. But I have to say, a little bit I've started to cheat because I noticed in the doctor's office yesterday that I was doing Reddit on a browser, not Reddit on the app, but I was doing Reddit on my phone, and I was like, David.
But hold on. I think I can make you feel better about this because I can completely give you dispensation for a doctor visit. It's not like you were going to get any writing done there. I mean, yes, you could say,
that's true.
I could have been daydreaming or something, but you're in a waiting room. There's nothing else to do. You want to make the time go by. I think we can give a pretty easy dispensation for waiting in a waiting room. You weren't going to get anything done there anyway.
I want to say I appreciate the Brad Geiger papal dispensations.
Yeah.
I do appreciate them. But I'm just going to tell you that having broken the seal on Reddit being on my browser on the phone, I'm still logged in to Reddit. I'm like, no, this is not good, bro. You know where this goes.
This is how the camel gets his nose in the tent.
No, exactly. The camel gets his nose in the tent. Absolutely. So, Brad, we've got a first question coming in from patreon.com/Comic Lab this week coming in, and it's a question about becoming a comics publisher.
Yes.
And I don't know that we've ever had this question before, so let me read it out to you. Hey, Brad and Dave, my question is this. Is my new business venture an exercise in greed or simply commerce in action? I recently started my own imprint where comic artists who aren't socially or business inclined pay me to print their comics for them under my imprint and sell them at my various market stalls and independent comic shops I have made deals with. I charge them 50% on top of print costs, and they receive 50% of market stall sales and 33% of comic shop sales. Cartoonists continue to own their creations and are free to go anywhere else for printing if they please.
Yeah.
I started this because I wanted to build a comics community, help artists who struggle to get themselves out there, and make additional income on my own cartooning. My anti-capitalist heart is telling me that I'm being greedy, but another part is telling me I'm doing good and there's nothing wrong with making a little money. Brad Geiger, giver of papal dispensations today, what do you say?
Here's the deal. So are you being greedy or are you being a business person? I don't know how you separate the two, right? I mean, the whole idea of being in business is making a profit for yourself, making this, in other words, worth your time. So as you well know, in capitalism, there is you have to make a profit or else you can't go on doing this unless you're going to look at this as an act of altruism. So I don't know how you separate the two, right? Of course, in doing this, you're probably going to make more money than the artist. And is that appropriate? I don't know. We can discuss that. But I'll be really honest with you. The headline here that I want to say is be careful. Be really, really careful, because when you make a mistake with your own comic property, when you make a mistake in ordering, or if you make a math mistake, or if you make a mistake that costs you money, it sucks. It's bad. It's terrible. But you've only hurt yourself. And you, in taking on responsibility for all these other people's dreams, and that's basically what you're doing, is taking responsibility for their dreams. Now, if you make a mistake, you become a villain, right? Because as you know, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. In fact, Dave has had to give me this talk a few times. Don't attribute to malice what could be attributed to incompetence, right?
Right.
If you do something that might just be honest incompetence, in other words, an honest mistake, you make an honest mistake.
Moron. Yeah,
right.
An honest.
Your people are not going to say, "Oh, there's just a good-hearted Joe who made an honest mistake." They're going to say, "This guy's a crook, and he swindled me out of X amount of money."
And that will spread, and it will impact your career going forward for longer than you care to know.
Yes, which is why it's really important. And I know I don't think this question asker is from the United States, so I'm sure legal concerns are different than the ones that I'm used to. However, human nature is the same across the globe. And if you don't have really solid, clear-cut contracts in place with these people that line up everybody's expectations on both sides of the table, how money gets split, who has the rights to what. In other words, if you're doing this printing on behalf of the artist, you need to make it clear that you own the copyright. In other words, you have the right to make these copies. You own the copyright for this usage and for X amount of time. Obviously, you want to make it clear that you're not grabbing the copyright terms over a long period of time. And by the way, just so you understand, every time, and this happens so often, you can set your watch by it. Like every 6 or 7 weeks, somebody will make a post on social media saying, I just read the Twitter terms of service, and Twitter has the copyright to all of your work. Just because you posted on Twitter, they're aghast and they're upset. And somebody's always got to wade into these conversations and say, no, they need to give themselves the copyright so that they can take what you uploaded and present it on their platform. They're not making a grab. They're just saying.
No, it's basically a license-free use of the work to distribute online. Yeah, exactly.
And non-exclusive and all that other stuff. Yeah. And they're not granting themselves extra rights. But in the comics community, you'll see this pop up every few weeks. If it ain't Twitter, it's Mastodon. If it ain't Mastodon, it's Threads or Blue Sky. My point is people misunderstand what they read in contracts, and you're going to have to make it very clear. But you also need to make sure those contracts are in place. You've got somebody else's dreams in your hands now, and people get really upset over something like that.
Yeah. So, let's delineate it even further. First of all, Brad's 100% right. You've got to contractualize it because there's 3 different obligations that you now have to this artist if you're the publisher. You have a legal obligation.
Yep.
You have a financial obligation. And if we're being generous, and we should be, you have a moral obligation to this artist, right? So all 3 of those can, even as Brad said, even within good-natured incompetence, you're a moron. You could absolutely step on a landmine and blow up one or all 3 of those just by being a good-natured moron. And so I will say about once not every 6 weeks like the Twitter thing, but I would say once every 12 to 24 months online, you hear about something blowing up where somebody has a little imprint going and they're not paying their bills, or the artists aren't getting paid, or they are getting paid, but there's some weird math going on and no one's real quite sure what's happening. Or, oh gosh, they just went bankrupt, but how do I reclaim my books from them and get the profit that I'm owed? Wait a minute, how does bankruptcy work? I'm not familiar. I'm not kidding. This is currently happening in San Francisco right now with a small imprint that's blowing up. So, what I'm saying there is Brad is 100% right. You've got to contractualize it, and you've got to make sure you've got some clauses in there that you're not even thinking of. Who pays for it when a print run goes wrong? Who pays for it when books get damaged in storage? Who pays for it when books get damaged in transit, or when a bookstore doesn't pay after sales have happened? All these things. I can think of 40 other things, rattle them off my list right now that are contingencies that you need to plan for, which I guarantee you are not planning for. But let's, Brad, maybe just do the math on this and see if it is naked capitalism or if it is good-natured capitalism.
Yes.
I mean, both. And by the way, both are possible in capitalism. You can have both a money grab. Yeah, what you were going to say, Brad? I'm sorry.
Just a quick throw in that just came to mind that we also have to put on this person's radar. Even though, like I said, I don't think this person's from the United States, but who's on the hook for sales tax and collecting and remitting that, or the equivalent of sales tax where you live, whether that's a VAT or what have you? Who's on the hook for the tax purposes of this commerce? You're doing commerce, so there's going to be taxes involved there somewhere. At some point, the government that you live under is going to want to know about this amount of money. Who's on the hook for that? And is that spelled out in your contract? Because let's say you're not collecting the correct tax, you don't want that to blow back on the person whose comic you're printing.
And if we're going to continue that line of thought, who's on the hook for libel or slander lawsuits that might come out, or for copyright infringements that might come out from printing? Or this, you can imagine 20,000 different things, but who is on the hook?
Right.
There is a reason why contracts have to be elucidated, because oh boy, it can get real complicated real quick if things aren't spelled out. So anyway, let's assume you've got a great contract. It nails down everything down pat, right?
Ironclad.
You have a good attorney. They got all the clauses in place. Everybody is clear on what their responsibilities are here. Now, let's just do the math and see if this even maths, because my spidey sense is the math doesn't math great on this. So let's just do the math. So let's assume, Brad, let's do 2 different scenarios. One, you're doing a flop floppy, which Brad and I never recommend, but people still do them. Let's assume you're doing a floppy, or let's assume you're doing a full, not a soft cover book, right? We'll do both of those scenarios, right? Let's assume the floppy. So Brad very kindly before the show went to Mix'em, which is a print on demand place, and looked up how much it would be to do a color uncoated stapled book with a color cover, right? And so let's assume we're going to do 100 copies of print on demand.
Yeah.
So Mix'em, will charge us $3.95, which includes shipping. Great, we're in, we're out for $3.95 for 100 copies. But then remember, the artist under this contract is going to be charged an additional 50% of those printing fees. So $3.95. So that means that another $197 will be charged to the publisher, the question asker in this case. So it's $197 to the publisher plus $3.95 for the Mix'em printing fees. So that's a $592 bill to the cartoonist for 100 copies of the book, right?
Right.
So now let's assume, and no one is ever going to pay this, but let's assume a real generous retail price, Brad, of $10 retail for this floppy. Now keep in mind, Brad, what are Marvel books going for right now as a floppy?
Like I was looking it up. It said between $3.99 and $6.99, and independent books were kind of in that same price range. Like artist editions obviously ran more. But right now, I did a quick, search online, and I came up with between like $3 and $6 in that category.
And that's fair. And by the way, even that pricing doesn't work great. But let's assume, Brad, that we're going to charge $10 a unit,
and we're going to assume that the sales are going to be great. In other words, you are doing a steel man argument. You're giving this the best chances for success.
By the way, you're the first person I've ever heard to use the phrase steel man, but now I really like it because it's the opposite of straw man. It's like you cannot lose with this steel man argument. So we are going to sell all 100 copies of this, which by the way, you're not. And we're going to sell them for $10 a unit, which by the way, you're not. So that's our steel man argument. Yeah. So now we're assuming $10 retail, that's going to generate $1,000 in sales.
Right.
But the cartoonist owes the printer, remember, $592, leaving only $408. So now here's where it gets a little dubious because the question asker wrote the question vaguely. Yeah. So there's two ways to do the math going forward on that $408. Yeah. They said the cartoonist will receive, quote, 50% of market stall sales. Right. So if we're assuming that they're going to get 50% of the gross market stall sales, that means they get $500, $1,000 in sales, right? We're going to assume 50% of the gross, that's $500. But remember, Brad, they owe $592 to the publisher. So now they're in the red $92 to their publisher on 100 books that they've sold. They lost money in the deal. Yeah. So let's be more realistic and assume what the question asker meant is they get 50% of the net market sales. So that means that they get half of what's left over after the printing and publishing fees have been removed. So that's $1,000 minus the $592. That leaves $408 in net profit, right? But they only get 50% of that. So in this case, the cartoonist is in the black for $204 off of $1,000 of retail sales. And the publisher, separate from printing costs, has made $401. So they have made double what the cartoonist has made off of $1,000 of retail sales, right? So now we can pause there, and I want everybody to remember that double number, and because Brad and I are going to circle back around on this in terms of morality, in terms of capitalism, in terms of what's right. But before we even do that, I want to say we are making a lot of assumptions in the fact that you are selling all 100 copies, in that they're going to actually move at a $10 price, and that you didn't immediately damage 5 of them somehow in putting them into a box, putting the box into the market stall, putting the market stall on display, because they're floppies. They're made out of like wishes and hopes. They're like the flimsiest things. I'm just saying they're made out of the flimsiest paper possible. You ding them and you cannot sell them for $10, right? And so that's assuming that you didn't immediately damage $5 and that you didn't immediately both go as a publisher and the printer. Well, I'd like to keep 2. Oh, I would also like to keep 2 for me. And so you can immediately imagine a world where 10 of these these can't even sell because they got damaged. You want to keep some. You want to give one to your mom. You'd love to give one to your significant other. You know, you can imagine where 10 immediately disappear from this 100 run.
Yeah.
So, Brad, let's steel man it, though. None of that has happened. You're going to sell all 100. You're going to sell them at $10 a pop. Is this morally, legally, financially a good deal for everybody involved?
Is it morally okay? Well, I have split feelings on that. My feeling is this is a publisher being a publisher. This whole thing you just went through is why we've had 400 episodes where we tell you it's worth your time to learn how to do this on your own. In other words, and by the way, what did the publisher do that this person couldn't have done on their own? Other than the printing, you can upload a file to mix them very easily and have these shipped to your door very easily. The only thing that this publisher, quote unquote, was able to do that the artist wasn't able to do was set up at a market stall and walk into these comic shops and offer the comic, I would assume, on commission. In other words, they're not getting paid up front, but the comic shop says, yeah, we'll put them on the shelf. And then if it sells, we'll give you the money from the sale after the cost, right? We take our cut, then we give the rest to you. And I've been involved in stuff like that. It has never been worth my time to do it. And you've got to watch them like a hawk because, as you might imagine, a comic shop owner who's got an awful lot of stuff to do to keep the lights on is not watching whether this one book that he put on the shelf is selling, right? You're going to have to go in and do an inventory and say, oh, looks like you sold 2 copies of, the Amazing Spider Person. And then they'll say, oh, yeah, here's your $1.50, right? So I've never found that to be particularly useful use of my time. And if you're doing it, great. But that's another one of those things that if you, as the publisher, are not going in there and doing an inventory and saying, oh, wait a minute, didn't you sell one of these books? Then you're not doing your job that you just got paid extra for doing, right? That's right. Part of your taking on $400 profit to your artist's $200 profit. Part of the reason that you earn that is because you're supposedly willing to do those things. Is it morally wrong? Yes and no. This is a publisher being a publisher. And this is why Dave and I tell you that it's worth your time to learn how to do this stuff on your own.
Right. And for me, the simple math is you do it on your own, you pocket $605. You have this printer do it, you pocket $204. So expand that out to every other project in your career. I mean, you're making a third of what you could be making on most things, if not worse, in terms of working with a printer or a publisher, you know?
Yeah. And not only that, but here's the problem. And again, I'm not saying this publisher is morally wrong.
No.
But I am.
By the way, a professional publisher, if you're retailing a book at $30, you're getting about $1 a book, you know?
Yeah.
So the math is even worse math on that one. So what I'm saying is it doesn't get better necessarily when you professionalize it, you know?
Here's the problem is that the artist is never, in most cases, the reason that artists and writers end up in these situations is that they never take the time to do the math. In other words, what's going to happen is this person's going to set up at a market stall and sell, let's steel man this one too, sell 20 books. And he's going to walk up to the artist the next week and hand him a check for whatever that money is. And the artist is going to feel like he just made money. I just earned whatever the amount is on that check. And because and he'll continue to earn, and that number will accumulate in that artist's head. But because the artist never does the actual math that you just laid out, that artist will never know that in some cases he might even be losing money, or he's not making anywhere near as much as he should be making. But he's just happy because now this person has money in their hand, and they never do the math to find out, oh my gosh, there's actually a whole lot more value here. In other words, like you said, there's $600 worth of value there. He's never going to say that to himself, or she's never going to say that to herself, because they're never going to bother to do the math. They're just happy that they've got a check in their hand.
Yeah. Well, now let me tell you too, after 25 years of being peripherally involved with some of this stuff, or just seeing it on the edges of my own career with other people, friends, peers, here's how it's more likely to go down when it's not steel manned. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've printed up the print on demand thing. Let's say the printing went great. First of all, not a guarantee that this other cartoonist knows more than you do about how to set up the files for print on demand or does it right. But let's say they all come out perfect. There's not a single one damaged. In fact, Mixum actually threw in 2 extra ones because who knows why. So you ended up with 102. Yeah. Great, right? So now in shipping them to you, here's what's actually going to happen. The printer is going to sell at market stalls, but they've also got their books selling next to the one that you've contracted with them, right? Which book do you think they're going to push a little bit more when they're at the location, at the market stall or at the comic book shop or wherever they are, right? Human nature being what it is. I'm just telling you what's going to happen, right? But okay, now your books are selling, but they're selling at a normal human pace for a new book that doesn't have a built-in audience, right? As Brad always says, before you do crowdfunding, first comes the crowd, then comes the funding. You're new in your career, let's assume, because that's most likely how you got involved with this at all. So you don't necessarily move them with an existing audience. You've got to generate it on its own. So that means every week, this other printer is selling maybe 10 copies at the market stall, right? So it's going to take you a few weeks, if not a few months, before you even see profit, because here's what's going to happen. They're going to pocket the printing costs and the publisher fees before they ever pay out what you were owed on a book. They're going to say, no, you've got to pay back the printing fees and the publisher fees first before we do any profit splits, unless they want to do the math. But I've seen it most often where you've got to pay back the printer and the publisher fees first. Yeah. So now it's a few months out from when you started selling. And frankly, the sales are slipping. And every time they get loaded up into the back of the car and then off to a market stall and a market stall back into the back of the car and back into the closet or back into the garage, 1 or 2 of them gets damaged in the process, right? So now you're a couple months out, a couple have been damaged. You're just starting to sell in a way that brings you profit. You can see where I'm going with this is that the other way, you doing it yourself, you're seeing profit immediately off of the first sale. Yeah. The other way, you've got to pay back the publisher and the printer fees first before you even see. And in the meantime, a lot of damage is accruing because you've printed a floppy and they're made out of dragonfly wings. Yeah. And so you see where I'm going with this, is that it could be 6 months out, 9 months out, a year before you see any dollars. And they're not a lot of dollars when they do start rolling in. Yeah.
And here's the part that does infuriate me. I because this happens all the time. I'm actually not, like I said, on the publishing side, that's a publisher being a publisher. How you feel about the scruples of that is up to you. That's not for me to say. It's like that story about the frog and the scorpion, you know? Yeah. The scorpion says, listen, that's what I do. I'm a scorpion. You know, you shouldn't have expected anything else. But on the artist side, here's the part that infuriates me. Because now, 6 months after this experience, that artist goes out on social media and says, well, you know, it's just impossible to make a living in comics.
Yes.
You know,
I don't know how to turn a profit. It's just, no one can do it. That's what enrages me. And when they go, no one can do it.
It's always no one can do it. No, you know, it's just,
impossible.
And they'll make these sweeping comments and they'll say, I sold X number of dollars or X number of copies, whatever that is. And I've got this and that, but you know, it's just impossible to make a living in comics. And then they will, because again, this is the way human nature human nature is, they'll have a lot of people believing them. And they'll have a lot of maybe young people who don't know any better saying, well, maybe I shouldn't get into comics because it's just impossible to make a living in comics. And this goes on, and then you got a whole other people who again were too lazy to ever do the math, too lazy to ever look into another way of doing it, who said, you know what, I also am failing, and it's not because of my own personal failing, it's because of this system that's broken. They say, yes, you're right. It's impossible to make a living in comics.
Yeah.
And this
so
conversation.
Two people who signed similar contracts like the one we're talking about this morning, they commiserate and they go, you're right, this is the only way to do it, and it doesn't work.
It's
and
just
Brad and I are over here
impossible.
pulling our hair going out, go, no, it's not the only way to do it. The way to do it is to own and control your own career, which we scream from the rooftops all the time.
And by the way, I know, if you've listened to the show for more than a minute, you know that I'm not a big fan of comic conventions and making sales there. So I get it if you say, I've got a certain amount of social anxiety, I can't show up to a comic convention. There's 110 ways to do this. And we've talked about them all for 400 episodes, and we plan to talk about them for another 400 episodes till you listen. But there's a lot of ways to do this, but they all involve you shaking off this idea that, frankly, this idea of you need a publisher that has been getting more and more untrue. It became untrue in about 25 years ago that you need a publisher. And Dave and I saw it right on the wall. You don't need a publisher. It's only gotten more and more easy. It's gotten more approachable and accessible to be an independent publisher. Every year after 2000, it's just got more and more accessible and approachable. But you need to shake off these assumptions that you've got that this is the only way to do it, and B, not for nothing, get off your ass
and learn,
and start learning.
It will benefit your whole career.
None of this is easy. I am hours away from pushing a button on a Kickstarter that I have might be the first time that I don't have nearly as much confidence for a number of reasons we'll go into through the next few episodes. This whole thing could fall apart and leave me in a really terrible situation. It very clearly could. None of that is easy. I've had a lot of nights where I woke up at 2:00 in the morning staring at the ceiling with my heart beating out of my rib cage. None of this is easy. But if you want a career in comics, this is the way to go, because along with all that comes the Kickstarter that I did last year that went fantastic and did everything financially that I needed it to be. And all the things that I learned doing that one, I'm applying to this one. And by the way, Dave made more mistakes on this one setting it up already that I've got in my file, in my pre-flight document that I'm going to apply to the next one. But it's a constant learning situation. It's not easy. Nobody's saying it's easy, but it does require you to get off your ass and to start getting active and start taking, I can't emphasize this one enough. Start taking an active interest in your own career.
And own and control it. That's the bottom line for me. I know that we are a broken record on saying own and control your own career. But Brad is going to town on that water, by the way, today, gang. He's already finished it off. This is a man that is thirsty to tell you to own and control your career. But I love that you recap it every time you finish drinking. It's like, microphone be damned. I'm going to recap this thing.
I know. If you ever watch me, when I'm talking, I'm waving my hands all there.
You're afraid you're going to hit it.
Yeah, and it's going to go all over, because you just picture Kermit the Frog introducing a guest. That's what I look like behind this freaking microphone for an entire hour's recording session.
But so getting back on the track and putting a bow on this is that one of the reasons why Brad and I try to wave people off from specific, very small micro publishing deals like this is that 99% of the time it goes wrong. And not even with malevolence or bad intentions. It's just somebody was a moron along the way and the whole thing blew up in their faces. And you never hear about it because they're a micro publisher. But Brad and I, over 25 years, have seen it happen again and again and again.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the reasons why we tend to wave people off going with a publisher is, unless you're at scale, and by scale, I mean a really huge New York Times bestseller, a lot of the math on publishing doesn't work for most people too. I mean, they make money, wink, but not necessarily enough to live off of, wink. And so you're like, so what's the path we recommend? To own and control your own career, because you are taking the lion's share of the profit on any book that you make. Are you selling less of them than with a publisher? Absolutely. But do the math on it, and you will see that you are making the lion's share in a way that actually ends up bringing you more money than even sometimes a wink good seller, not a New York Times bestseller, but a good seller with a publisher. So it's the path we recommend for a long-term sustainable career that you own and control, is do the publishing yourself. So is this morally egregious, or is this legally or financially egregious?
Where do you come down on the morals of this? I'm interested. Where do you come down on that whole thing?
I mean, there is an argument to be made that the publisher, is taking on risk, is bringing their skill set to producing a book, is hand-holding someone through their own anxieties to make their first book, probably, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is, you got to jump in the pool at some point, and you might as well do it on a floppy where the costs are not ruinous versus on a 4-color offset softcover or hardcover book where the prices are a little bit higher, you know?
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't do the math on I'm not going to go through it now because we're already a half an hour into the discussion, but I didn't do the math on a softcover. Yeah. But let's just say, gang, it's also still not great. You know, that's the short version of this talk, is that it's still not great because you have to recoup printing costs, and then it's that 50% publisher costs, and then 50% of the net, if we're being generous, still doesn't leave the cartoonist with very much on a print run of 500 or 1,000 books. Yeah. So
the freight becomes more expensive too. At that point, that's working against you.
And so is this morally egregious? I actually don't think so. They are taking on certain risks. They're probably warehousing for the cartoonist. That's annoying. They're making sure that there's no damage to these floppies or these soft covers. That's annoying and requires its own set of space around an office or a garage or a house. So is it more? It's not. I don't love it, but it's not. I don't know that it's egregious. You know.
And let's go a little bit more the other way. That market stall was not free. The publisher's going out of pocket for that.
Their time on a Saturday is not free.
They say they've got deals with certain comic shops they're walking around to and making these sales calls. That's their time. That's their effort. So and that's all part of the whole game. So I again, it's the frog and the scorpion. You can't blame a publisher for being a publisher. That's just the name of the game.
But now let's call it on the cartoonist side of things. Is the cartoonist being a moron if they're going this route?
In my opinion, yes.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah.
I think if it's your first book and you just want to even see if your stuff can get out in the world, maybe I can kind of hand wave away to be like, yeah, that's fine. You did it with this person and it came out and it didn't really sell and you never really saw any profit. But now you have some books and you can walk it around and that's fun.
Yeah.
But if I'm being honest, by the time you're into your year 6 to 10 point, you should be thinking about publishing your own stuff, not going through a micro publisher like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's never been this accessible. They've come so far in all of this stuff. Literally, if you can put a comic up on the web, you can upload a document to a print on demand publisher and have this whole thing ready to go on your own.
Yep, 100%. Hey, gang, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And you'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And ho Nelly, if you want even more comics goodness in your life, check out the new drawing show that we're doing with our pal Kevin McShane over at wrongwayshow.com. That's wrongwayshow.com.
In each episode, we'll show you how to draw your favorite cartoon characters the wrong way.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, we've got our next question coming in from Charlie, and it says, "Hey, Brad and Dave, I often see people asking about how to develop their style, but I wonder how important you think it is to even have a style. In the 33 years that I've been developing my art skills, I've never landed on an approach that made me say, this is it. This is the way I'm going to draw from now on. Instead, sometimes I want to focus on an approach with lots of hatching on one project, the next with the loose noodle arm cartoons, and then another project where I really hone in on the human form. Sometimes I think having a signature style would be nice, but I think I would lose interest after a while. What are your thoughts on this? Is there a downside to not developing a signature style, especially in comics?" Yeah. Bradley J. Geiger, that is the question for you, my friend.
Man, that's a toughie. Here's another one where I kind of have two minds, but for the most part, I don't think a style is important. I think a style is inevitable. And I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah. In other words, the way I kind of define style for myself when we're talking about art, and it comes to writing too. A writing style could be defined this way too. But speaking about art, every illustration that you make is a culmination of drawing challenges that you have to solve. How am I going to do the perspective here?
Right.
If I do some incidental overlaps, can I make that perspective pop a little bit more? How do and right down to how do I draw noses? How do I draw eyes? Every one of those is a problem, is a challenge that as an artist you have to solve. And what happens is, at least in my own experience, over years and years, the same challenges come up time and time again.
Yep, they do.
It's like, oh, I've solved this one so many times.
I remember how I did this. Yeah, exactly.
That you don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just boom, that nose comes right out. And believe me, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old following how to draw comics the Marvel way, I could not draw noses for the life of me. I could not follow those instructions. My noses looked horrible. And it really vexed me. And now I kind of delight in drawing a nice nose. I think it's a fun part of the face.
I love hearing you say I kind of delight in drawing a nose.
I kind of do.
That Brad, you're like that old rhyme. Moses, he noses his noses aren't roses, but noses supposes erroneously. Because Moses, he noses his noses are roses, as Moses supposes his noses to be.
Just my luck. The first time you get lyrics right.
and just a reminder, ladies, I'm off the market. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Dave Kellett has spoken for.
The only way to make that better is if it would have been coming out of the shower in a hotel room.
Tiny bubbles.
Oh my God! Don't start that again. But no, and when you solve these challenges over and over again, and those same solutions show up on the page, that's an art style.
Yes,
It's the culmination of all these solutions that you've made. Now, having said that, there's people I know that their whole career is built on the fact that if you tell them to draw a SpongeBob comic book, they can put pen to paper and it'll come out looking exactly like that style. And then,
I would say Lar D'Souza, D. Fish, they can nail a style as soon as you want them to. Nail it.
And there's the next project that comes up. Maybe they've got to draw in a classic Marvel comic style or in an Adventure Time style. You see, and they can nail them all. And for that, you ask, is style important to them? And then maybe the slippery answer is but not in the same way. Their versatility to assume a whole bunch of other people's drawing challenge solutions is a style in and of itself. Is that their willingness to adapt other people's styles? But I don't know. Just speaking from my own personal experience, the thoughts of one guy, I don't think a style is important so much as it's inevitable.
So I really want to drill down on that word inevitable, because when you said that, I lit up like your all year round Christmas lights that you're too lazy to take down. So
Those are decorative porch lights. I can make them, and I do. I had them in.
Can I tell you, nothing belies a lazy man like saying, no, it's not that I'm lazy to take them down. It's that they're needed 365 days of the year. You never know when you're going to need some LED lights on the outside of your house, David.
Yes, they are. They were red, white, and blue for the 4th of July. When the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, they were green and white. I'm telling you, and when they're not, they're beautiful golden hue.
Meanwhile, gang, here's what's actually happening on a Saturday afternoon as Brad is padding around in his socks with his full-size PJs on, and he's got his chamomile tea. He's like, I don't need to get the ladder out. The ladder's way down in the basement. I don't want to go get the ladder. I'd have to carry it up 2 floors and bring it out outside. It's chilly. It's kind of fall brisk right
now.
And
if I stand up, I always have to plan if I'm going to do yard work because I got to make sure I bring my over-the-ear headphones on. Because then I put those things on. I don't play music because what the fuck? But it tells the entire neighborhood, don't bother talking to this guy. He can't hear you. He's not going to talk back. And so I can go out there and do
this. Can I tell you, we are a study in contrast. I go out of my way. My wife is like, why are you talking to the neighbors so much? And I'm like, because it's good to build that network. Yeah. And you're like, don't talk to me. Don't come near me.
I've got a neighbor like you.
You're beating neighborhood kids with Halloween candy.
I've got a neighbor like you. That's the reason I wear the
headphones. We would be the worst neighbors because I want to be like, hey, buddy, what's happening, Brad? And you're like, get the hell away from me. I'm trying to do my...
Just let me rake up these leaves.
I'm trying not to take my lights down. Leave me alone. So anyway, I want to focus in on the word inevitable because I think we can't give this enough weight because I think... This person is saying to themselves, well, I don't have a style. Look at all the variability in what I try to draw. I don't have a style. But if Brad and I were given their last 30 pages of their notebook or whatever they've produced on their page, you and I and everybody else would be like, well, I see your style. Your style is kind of it's kind of a mix of Garfield and a little bit of Bloom County and a tiny bit of Mobius. And like, you know what I mean? We would see the style, even though they don't. By the way, that was the weirdest style combination.
That's a hell of a style right there.
Yeah. Who doesn't love to see Odie as drawn by Mobius? That's what I'm saying. No, but what I'm saying is you can see a style just like, I don't know, Tawhid, Bondia, or Will Henry, they might not think they have a style, but you, me, and everyone else goes, oh, yeah, they have a style. By the way, I'm sure they know they have a style. Yeah. But if this person has been drawing for 33 years, Brad, you can't tell me they don't have a default style that they kind of revert to when they're not doing wiggly noodle arms or when they're not doing heavy cross-hatching. Brad, you've been drawing for 30 years now. Does Brad Guigar have a style?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've got absolutely. Yeah.
Of course you have a style. Does Dave Kellett have a style after 30 plus years of drawing? Yes, of course. So I think this person is just not looking at their own work with enough clear-eyed awareness to say like, yes, of course you're drawing variable stuff and you're trying out different styles and you're trying materials and mediums that might not necessarily imply that you have a style. But in your default state, I think you absolutely have a style.
Well, and it's also possible to have multiple styles that are also your own, right? Because I've got a style.
That's true. Brad has multiple styles. Yeah. Yes, he sure does.
I've got one very defined style for Evil Ink and After Dark and stuff like that. And then I've also got kind of for like single panel stuff, I actually kind of flip-flop between a couple of styles, that one of which I kind of consider to be like political cartooning style. Yes. And another one that you keep saying, it has a very 50s look to it.
It does to me.
Yeah. And like, I know that it's a dated look because I look at the way I draw.
By the way, if you're hearing that as an insult, please do not. I hold 1950s cartoons as such a specific, I don't know, angle on cartooning.
Aesthetic.
So when you do, aesthetics, thank you. So when you do it, I want you to hear it as a compliment, not as an insult. I think your single panel comics, when you draw them in, and it's not a 1950s style, what it is it's a little zhuzh of 1950s on top of what Brad Guigar draws. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And but like I have a tendency to draw the balloon heads, the head, almost like Homer Simpson that comes out of the shoulder.
And they're less 5 heads heads high. They're more like 3 heads high, 4 heds high.
And like and then even then, like there's some derivations in there that I keep experimenting with to see. I kind of like this a little bit this way, but I like that a little bit that way. Long story short, like I've got a couple of different styles that I can very easily fall into, and they all involve a look that's very identifiable as me, right?
True.
So it is possible to have multiple styles that are equally your own.
Yes, but undeniably yours. Like I see any one of the 3 styles, because you also had a slightly different style when you were doing Fables. That was a slightly different style. And it involved slightly different cartooning techniques too, because of the way it was being transmitted. So you used a little bit different Anyway, can I ask you a question that I've never asked you? Do you see Sheldon and Drive as different styles, just out of curiosity?
Slightly. I see them as cousins. I see them as very, very close in the same family. In other words, if Arthur were to suddenly show up in Drive, it wouldn't be so discordant that I couldn't believe it. Like Mobius, a Mobius figure showing up in Bloom County. That would be ridiculous. But your style, those 2 styles to me are almost like cousins. They're very similar, but they're not the same.
Right. Okay, that's fair. And by the way, great use of discordant. I don't know that I've ever heard you use discordant. Ladies, I have to tell you, he's also off the market. I'm sorry about that. So if you're looking for a guy that can use discordant,
and who isn't?
And also, just a reminder, 365 days of lights on his house. So
and they could be any lights you want. I mean, I keep waiting for my wife to say,
"So trying to sell it."
Every now and again, I wish my wife would just say, "You know what? Chartreuse, magenta, and pink." And I could be
then you from the couch is like, "I'm on it, honey."
Yeah. But she
with your footy
never gives me
pajamas,
those challenges,
and your chamomile tea, and your footy pajamas on the couch. Yeah. So no, I also see them as cousins, but I will tell you that I allow for. I don't know how to say this. Drive is cleaner in line art than Sheldon is, intentionally so.
Oh yeah.
Sheldon, I allow for more mistakes that the ink caused, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I allow for it. And there's also more detritus and like whimsical pen and ink nonsense that Drive does not have,
Detritus, another great word. This is a very, like, I think today's episode is like way above our usual 5th grade reading comprehension level. This is up to like 8th or 9th grade. Detritus is a wonderful word.
Detritus, discordant. It's such a shame that we're not on the market anymore because, boy, it would be a form an orderly line type of a situation because what a vocabulary. The diction on Brad Geiger today, just Webster himself would be like, well, hello.
That's what they mean when they say big D energy. They're talking about diction, right?
Big diction energy. Damn it. Imagine the diction on that guy. All right. So there's got to be a better joke than that. Hold on. Give me 10 seconds. I got nothing. All right. Well, I tried. The problem is, unlike you, I don't have a lot of dick jokes in the hopper because I don't tend to go blue as much. So I just don't have them at the ready.
Oh, my God. That was a great story from the NCS. Somebody was explaining to me how they really had an appreciation for cartoonists who worked clean. Because it was so much, and by the way, this person was a perfectly nice person. They were speaking from their heart. There was no offense taken.
There's no ill will.
It was just perfectly fine. But the more they went down that road about how hard it is to work clean and how sometimes working blue is a bit of a crutch, and sometimes. And as they're talking, you could see in their eyes that they realized that they were talking to me. And do you ever have that situation where you just can't stop talking? I finally had to gently, take the conversation and save them from themselves and direct it another way. But it was like they were drowning. And I just had to say, yeah. And by the way, they call for rain tonight.
One of my favorite lines that my wife ever wrote for her show One Day at a Time, she had Stephanie Beatrice there was some character talking to her that was saying something uncomfortable, and Stephanie Beatrice goes, "Oh, look, anyone else?" and just walks off. And
That's beautiful.
I have so rarely gotten to use that line in public, but you could have used that so beautifully at the NCS. "Oh, look," as you point across the room, "anyone else?"
Anyone else?
All right, so Brad, let's close up the show since we kind of put a button on that one. I think let's close it up with one question that I think is kind of an easy one to answer because it seems to Brad and I in our own businesses how we're handling this. It's a quick one about overseas shipping. So this one comes in from Radon, and it says, "Hey, Dad and Brave, I'm thinking about a Kickstarter, but am a bit hesitant, mostly because, according to my statistics, more than half of my readership is from the U.S.
Yeah.
The problem is, I am not. I can either make a Kickstarter focusing on Europe or hope that enough of my American readers will eat the fees, though planning to send anything to the U.S. right now seems impossible, and possible tariffs that might come between now and Kickstarter and the fulfillment. What do you think? Wait until I can plan better, leave the U.S. out of my Kickstarter, or is this actually a book on demand situation? Love your show. Keep it up and keep me laughing." Brad, what kind of answer do we have for this question asker?
Well, listen, I'll tell you right now. I just mentioned my Kickstarter at newevilbook.com, by the way.
Oh, wait, what was that? Because I don't think I heard that.
It was newevilbook.com, the new
so
book.
Is that one word, and new
All
is at
one
the
word.
front and evil is in the middle and book is at the end there?
You've got it exactly right. And it's for the new Evil Inc. After Dark Kickstarter, collecting 3 wonderful chapters plus one that is a bonus. You're going to love it so much.
Wait, no. Is this a full color book, Brad?
Full color, 120 pages. That's all. No big deal.
Is this, but does it combine both delightful adventure with a little bit of spice and fun?
A whole lot of spice, yeah.
I saw some of the pages you had to black out. It's a lot of spice, Brad.
I didn't do a lot of mosaicing.
My voice breaks on that one. That was amazing.
But no, I will tell you right off the bat that I am not, for the first time ever, this is, I think, my 8th Kickstarter. I am not doing international shipping. And I know I'm going to pull the trigger on it in a couple hours here. I know that it's going to be upsetting for some of my readers. But speaking of math, I literally sat down and did the math and saw, okay, here's how much money you made from international backers last time.
Yep.
You stand to lose that much money if you shut this out. Are you comfortable with that? And in my case, I was. It was like, okay, that stinks, but it's not a deal breaker. And also, I looked at not for nothing. I made a couple of mistakes figuring out my international shipping charges because I was using Kickstarter and not BackerKit, which I was much more comfortable with. Going right, by the way, Dave, I'll tell you right now, going right back to BackerKit. I used Kickstarter for fulfillment once. Oh, man. BackerKit had updated and was confusing me. And when I sit down to do BackerKit again this time, I'm going to have this episode on replay in the studio where I say that part about getting off your ass and doing the hard things, even if they're hard and all that kind of stuff. Because I got to take that advice. But anyway, when I looked at what I had paid in shipping charges and how much I'd collected, I was not very pleased with that math either. And then throw in the guy that said he was a Texas resident when he made his pledge, bought $250 worth of books. So he bought a lot of heavy books. And then after he was charged, changed his shipping address to his real address in Australia.
And
left me on
son
the
of a
hook
bitch
for hundreds in shipping. I literally had
that
to
is
either
uncool. I would not honor that. I would not honor that. I would tell him they either have to PayPal me or
I have his name if anybody wants to know who to look out for.
No, don't name and shame. That's not cool.
No, I won't say it on the show, but so here's
I would
the
not
deal.
honor that. I'm just saying that out loud. I would not honor that. I'd be like, you did this on purpose and this is not cool.
It was another thing where I did the math and it was like I lose either way. I'm
No,
gonna
you
lose
make
either
them
way.
PayPal you. You say, here's my PayPal. You're sending me another $40 because this is ridiculous. This is not what you signed up for. Anyway,
I should have.
That's a separate matter.
all
I'm
of
mad
which
for my
just-
friend. I'm like a protective hen. Don't you pick on my Brad Geiger. He's so thin. He's like a thin Victorian sickly child.
I've got rickets over here. For
Don't you
Christ's
pick
sake.
on my Timothy Chalamet as he's stuck on Arrakis. Don't you do it.
But no, I'm getting rid of international shipping for this reason, and because all of it has gotten so complicated. And this is going from the US to like the UK and the EU and Australia, but all of the new VAT tax stuff and all of the any tariffs, like if my readers are going to be hit with a charge when the book arrives at their doorstep, all of that stuff. I said no. So here's what I'm going to say to our question asker. I think you've got one of two choices, one of which is to find a company that is willing in the United States that's willing to do the distribution for you. Like they handle, even if you do the printing, you ship it to them and they become the distributor. And of course, you're going to, like we talked about all episode, there's going to be a scorpion effect to that as well. But that's not going to be nearly as bad as what you're going to be on the hook for international shipping. You're going to need to find a U.S. distributor. And the other only option, as Sean Wong was telling us on the stage at the NCS Comic Lab live show, what he does is he sets up a POD and lets his international people get the book from that. I would just say, and I'm casting no aspersions on Sean in this, as what I would do if it was me personally, because I know the quality would be so much different than the offset. I would make sure that I'm communicating that very clearly to the people that are buying that they're getting a very different book than the one that my Kickstarters are giving to my people. But those are my two suggestions. What am I missing here? What's is there a better suggestion?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. First of all, right now for our international friends, I want you to know that in the U.S., there used to be this screen that used to come on the TV when things were going wrong with broadcasting, and it used to say, technical difficulties, please stand by, right? Because the broadcaster wanted you to know that either a satellite was down, their dishes were down, their tape machines weren't working, whatever it was. They used to put up a screen that said, technical difficulties, please stand by. And for our international pals, I want you to know that the entire United States kind of has that sign on right now. We're kind of having technical difficulties, please stand by. So, like, we're not excited about what's happening. We know that we're a dumpster fire right now, or at least the well-thinking Americans know that. And so it is super telling that DHL, one of the largest international shippers that moves a shit ton of product around the world, has stopped shipping to the United States.
Did they really?
I think, they stopped their U.S. shipping.
Ooh.
I think the Canada equivalent, I think it's the Canada equivalent transnational Post? Canada Post. But there's another version of Canada Post that does transnational. Anyway, regardless, UPS International, not UPS, but UPS International, I think has put their shipping on hold. They haven't said they stopped it. They said they put it on hold, all because they can't figure out how to implement the tariffs. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole separate issue, because it used to be that packages under a certain amount didn't have to pay a tariff, and now they do. But now the U.S. government, rather than doing it themselves, is putting it on the shippers. And DHL is saying these rules aren't clear. We're just going to not ship instead of having to do this. All of which to say is the U.S. is a dumpster fire. And so we get that. And what I'm telling you is you could wait. That's an option. Waiting is an option. But these tariffs, I will put it to you this way. Once governments get addicted to a tax, they very rarely step away from it. And what you're going to find is, even if Democrats get back into office, some of these tariffs might stick around. And in general, Western democracies, as their own fertility rates are dropping, they're looking for new tax bases. And so tariffs or import taxes are an easy, somewhat non-painful way, comparative to income tax, to hit their own tax base. And so I don't know that you're going to see tariffs worldwide going down necessarily. You might in the next 20, 30 years see tariffs start going up as Italy and Korea, their own fertility rates start hitting them in the wallet. And so anyway, all that to say is you currently have 50% in your readership in the US. And I'm assuming, let's just say for argument's sake, the other 50% is in Europe.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, Brad, based on the way that question was answered.
Sure.
I just want to tell you, boy, do I feel for this situation because this is shitty. I just want to say to you as a friend, this is shitty because for Brad and I, somewhere between 75 and 85% of our readership is in the U.S. We have this amazing shipping system that can get a package to Maine, to Alaska, to Hawaii for basically the same price.
Yeah.
So a book is, once you get into the U.S., it's super easy to ship. You are on the brunt of this in terms of what to do. I think you definitely don't want to print offset in the U.S. That will cost you a shit ton of money. Both Brad and I would love to print offset in the US. We would love it. But it can be sometimes 3 and 4 times the cost of printing in China or in Indonesia or in Vietnam or Mexico or even Canada.
Yeah.
Or Canada. So basically the US offset industry fell apart around 30 years ago, and there's kind of not a lot of companies that can do it. They exist. They do still exist, but boy, are they expensive. So anyway, I wouldn't promote printing offset in the U.S. So that leaves you with, as Brad said, print on demand. So then the question is, do you charge the same price as you're charging your Kickstarter backers for a 4-color offset print? That's up to you and your own feelings on it. I could see you having to say, look, I still need to make a profit and money from these. And so you might just have to say, listen, this is offset, but unfortunately, for the nature of the profit of what I make on this, I still have to charge the same price. And people will probably be like, all right, I get it. You could also offer U.S. shipping, knowing that it's going to be hard to find a shipper given DHL right now. It's going to be hard to find a small shipper that's willing to ship into the U.S. For at least the next 6 months. And or if you do ship it into the U.S., it will be hit with probably a 7% tariff. I guess, don't hold me to this, by the way, Redan, but it's probably going to be a 7% tariff, which is because of the U.S. Rates on books right now. Might be more, might be less, but that's just my ballpark. So you might just have to tell folks, hey, in addition to the exorbitant shipping fees to ship to you, when the book arrives, DHL or UPS or whatever these worldwide shipping companies might charge you an additional, let's say 7 to 15% on top of everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so some US customers might be like, yeah, I'm fine doing that. This is only a $30 book plus $30 shipping plus 7 to 15%. They might be like, yeah, that's fine. But you might find they'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go to the offset printing. I'm going to go the print on demand route. I'm happy to do it that way. So So in terms of your 3 options, should you wait until you can plan better? I don't know that you can plan better at least until the U.S. midterms. And that, as of the airing of this show, is about 400 days away. And yes, I do have a timer on my phone, Brad. That's how anxious I am. That's how anxious I am about the midterms, is that I have I'm going to show it to my friend Brad Geiger because I know he doesn't believe me. Brad, do I have a timer on my phone to the midterms?
That's a huge number, but that's a timer for the midterms. Absolutely.
So it's about 400 days, 6 hours, 9 minutes, and 26 seconds until the U.S. midterms. And so, so you have about 400 days until we get a little more clarity on where tariffs will be.
Well, again, like Dave said earlier in the show, that's if there is a party change, and then that's if the other party actually, and here's the theme of the day, gets off their ass and does something.
Right. Yeah.
That's another big if.
And if the government doesn't find that they are now addicted to this now income source, which I'm just going to be honest, between you, me, and the wall, once governments get a new income source, it's hard to walk away from it.
Say no.
It's hard to say no to $30 billion, $60 billion, $100 billion. So anyway, so wait until you can plan better. You would have to at least wait 400 days until the U.S. midterms, and there's no guarantee they're going to go great. I'm just saying that as an American. There's no guarantee. No. And so do you leave the U.S. out of your Kickstarter? I would, and maybe go with print on demand. I think Sean is probably right, and Brad are probably right that that's a good way to go.
Yeah.
Or in your third answer, is this actually a book on demand question completely? That's a possibility, but I would guess if 50% of your audience is in Europe, you might still like to bring 500 to 1,000 copies into Europe and ship those out and have beautiful offset 4-color books.
Right, and have those in storage for when things get better. and then you can offer them as add-ons to a future
because then
Kickstarter, or
next
put them
time you
into
go to
distribution.
Angoulême Comics Festival or Nuremberg Comic Festival or London, what is the Bubble Fest? What's it called? The London
Thought
one?
Bubble, right?
Thought Bubble. Yeah, Thought Bubble. Thank you. So when you go to one of those, you have these beautiful four color offset books, and you yourself will have a book that you're proud of.
Yeah.
I will tell you that, again, though, in friendship, you're kind of in a pickle here. And I just want you to know that Brad and I are cognizant of the unique financial situation that you're in terms of which route to go. This is not, we also have had similar questions from friends in Australia that are like, hey, even worse, I have 80% of my readers in the US and 20% in Australia. What do I do? And, then you would just have to go with a fulfillment company in the US. But I mean, that is another option, is having a fulfillment company in the US, but you would still have to pay two different pallets, one going to Europe, one going to some port on the West Coast, probably Seattle or LA. Yep. And then you'd have to pay warehousing fees, and then you'd have to pay a fulfillment company, and your profit would be just eaten away by that. You become like our first question asker, where you get $2 off of a $10 book, Yeah. So anyway, my sympathies to you, because this is not an easy one financially to advise on. Don't you think, Brad?
I don't think there's a right answer here. I think it's literally mitigating any risk is what you're looking for here, and holding on for better days ahead.
Yeah. And I will say it'll be curious to see what happens with newevilbook.com, as Brad is also jumping in here. What, did I have that right, Brad? Was it newevilbook.com?
No, I'm sorry, Dave. It's newevilbook.com.
I'm going to say it slower because I don't think you're pronouncing it right. You're saying New Evil and then book.com?
Yep. Now you got it that time. Newevilbook.com. It's
newevilbook.com.
It's an evil book, but it's the new evil book.
Oh, it's the newevilbook.com. All right. Well, that explains it. Anyway, all right. I think we've gotten 15 in so far, so that's good.
We're done. We got our quota, and that means I can say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful friend, the cartoonist Brad Guigar, the cartoonist of Evil Comic over at, I'm not even going to say his normal URL. He's over at newevilbook.com. Once again, that's newevilbook.com.
And my very thoughtful friend, Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com, and a wonderful co-host of our really exciting drawing show that you can see at wrongwayshow.com.
I think, Brad, you said the URL to wrongwayshow.com wrong. I think it's actually pronounced newevilbook.com, isn't it? Isn't that
Thank you for the correction. It is indeed newevilbook.com.
You know what? I thought I had it wrong. I will say that the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton over at... oh, God, I forgot the URL.
It's newevilbook.com.
Oh, it's newevilbook.com. Brad, can I trouble you to read the URL, Brad, as your friend has
Andy
forgotten
Creighton
it?
at theworldrecord.net.
Theworldrecord.net, and this episode and every episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
You got that one. And if you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, where we are burning up those podcast charts.
And don't forget to jump in and join us over at patreon.com, because you help make the show possible over at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will say that twice, patreon.com/sickly Victorian child.
What is it about sickly Victorian child that I mean, they're also, this is a type of person that is also considered very attractive. How come slightly overweight, not so Victorian adult never gets any mention in the newspaper?
Can I tell you, my wife had an employee, and I'm not going to out them publicly, but my wife had an employee a couple years back who she specifically said she liked thin, sickly, Victorian children-looking men because
Oh my God.
she felt like, they need me to take care of them. And that was literally, she was like, oh yeah, they need to be taken care of.
Oh my
and that
gosh.
like I said, I'm not yucking her yums. That was her thing. She was like, no, I'm into it. I'm super into it. It's like, I don't want a big, strong man, like all muscles, and I want a thin, sickly Victorian child that I can take care of.
There's a woman that really gets off on making porridge in the morning.
Time to take a medicine, but the medicine bread is delivered by a big spoon.